What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Inside the U Transfer Portal show. We got David, we got Gabby. We're just going to talk about our takeaways from the first day of the transfer portal window opening. Discuss some guys that are out there, some things that Miami should be looking forward to. David, let's get right into it. Just your initial takeaways, kind of just the news or just kind of what kind of happened on this first day.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing, maybe not necessarily from a Miami perspective, but just a college football perspective, is there's going to be a lot of quarterback movement. I think just within the ACC, I think I read somewhere that 6 starters in the ACC entered the portal today. You have Devin Leary, Brennan Armstrong, DJ Uiagalelei, Keaton Slovis, Phil Jerkovich is going from BC to Pitt. So there's going to be a lot of turnover at the quarterback spot all over the country, but especially in the ACC. And just in general, I think it's day one. I don't know if anyone knew what this was going to be. Um, I still think there's going to be plenty of really talented players entering the portal. It's a 45-day window, and I think you're going to see another influx happening after bowl season. But I will say, I think there's easily 5 to 10 players that are good enough to go to Miami that would help this roster, et cetera, et cetera. We can get into that later. I don't know if Miami's necessarily targeting these players, but it's day one. It's maybe not a list that's going to blow a lot of people away. But the bottom line is there's good players all over the country.
Gabby, I want to get your thoughts on this too, and we'll kind of just have this discussion here. But just to wrap it up here, so 10 guys at Miami. These guys were essentially expected to. It kind of just became official. 6 defensive backs, just reeling off the names here with Al Blades Jr., Keyshawn Washington, Jalen Harrell, Avante Williams, Gilbert Frierson before, Isaiah Dunson. Those 6 guys, a couple guys, defensive linemen, Elijah Roberts, Alan Hay, a couple of reserves, and then the running back and Thad Franklin and Keyshawn Smith. Again, names that have already been out there in terms of they were expected. They said they were going to. So nothing really surprising in that front. But Gabby, you're just your thoughts on these guys and essentially are they impact? Do you think anything is a big impact here?
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't think that there was a ton of impact, departures at this point. And, again, maybe some interesting names. I mean, Avante Williams obviously came to Miami as a highly regarded recruit, one of the top safeties in America. It was a really fun recruitment there at the end where everyone thought he was going to Florida. So kind of a high profile prospect. But, at the end of the day, the way at least in my perspective, the way I'm viewing it is that he was kind of a backup safety on a 5-7 team. I think at some point you need to be able to separate like the prospect from like what he has developed into in college. And yeah, it maybe hurts from like a depth perspective. Maybe, I don't know, maybe there was something in there that, maybe someone else can tap into. But overall, I think that, I don't think any of these departures really hurt Miami long term. I don't think that there's anyone that's leaving the program now that Miami's necessarily going to miss. And I don't say that in a way that's insulting. I just think this program needs to just kind of keep it moving along. They just got to kind of be forward focused. Whoever doesn't want to be here doesn't want to be here. They need to get guys that are on board with the vision, with what Coach Cristobal wants to do here at Miami. And if those guys don't want to be here, I think that's fine. Again, they didn't sign up to play for Mario Cristobal. They signed up to play for Manny Diaz. If they want to pursue other options, I think that's totally fine. So I'm excited about the guys that Miami's planning on bringing in. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to track. And whoever doesn't want to be here, I think it's understandable. And I think that's just a part of this process.
The 2 offensive guys, I think there's always been a little bit of intrigue with both these guys. With Thad Franklin, over 5 yards of carry in his 2 seasons, but just couldn't essentially crack the rotation heavily with either staff. And I think people always wanted to see more. I think the coaches wanted more, and it just didn't work out. And he's going to move on. Nearly 400 yards of offense. Keyshawn Smith showed flashes. He 48 catches in 3 years. A guy that kind of looked like to be turning the corner last year, took a step backwards in terms of production this year, but did average over 30 yards, a kick return and speed. To me, I think that's, they're going to lose out on that speed. He was the guy that led the team in yards per catch. They've got to find a way to kind of make up for it moving forward. So these 10 names, essentially nothing big in terms of surprises. Honestly, my takeaway from the day, I was surprised that we didn't hear a couple names or more new names. That was my takeaway today. like David mentioned, 45-day window. So I don't think it's over.
More
I
will
would be
come.
shocked. Yeah, and I think quality guys, and certainly something
Sure.
to pay attention to. Who are some guys? And hate to kind of speculate. Obviously, the big name, I've got one in mind, but who do you think are maybe some guys to just watch for, whether they're going to return or come back? I did get some confirmation that Jake Lichtenstein, nothing big in terms of impact player, but a nice rotation guy. He will come back for a 7th year, so that's kind of confirmed. But other than that, maybe some guys to watch for.
Are you saying from a Miami perspective?
Yeah, on their current roster, we've got 10 names already officially in. Are there some other guys to maybe pay attention to, who are some other guys that could potentially either go or come back?
Well, I know for me, and I'm not saying either way, really. I guess I lean towards just, the vibe I get from the inside is that Tyler Van Dyke probably is going to come back. But in this transfer portal era, I think anything's on the table. And until a player either comes out and officially says, or a coach can come out and officially say, yes, this player is expected to be back, et cetera, it's not definite. So he's one of the guys that I definitely am curious about until things are official, whatever that means during this transfer portal era. And then outside of him, I just honestly, all I care about are kind of the good players, the players that I think can be productive players for, I don't know, maybe a 10-win team. And I'm not saying any of these guys are, thinking about entering the portal, but it'd be guys like a Cam Kitchens, who I think's a lock to stay, a guy like a James Williams, a guy like a Leonard Taylor, I think a Daryl Jackson, you got to keep him. And, outside of those guys, it's the freshman class. You got to keep those guys in. You just signed them and brought them in last year. Outside of that, honestly, I'm not really tied into, I want everyone to come back. I want everyone to do well. But at the end of the day, like Gabby referenced earlier, this was a 5-17. And so that's what you are. And when you go 5-7, you open yourself up to a head coach going out and bringing guys in to take your job.
Yeah, and I think go ahead, Gabby.
Yeah, no, just I guess on that subject. I do expect to see some guys move on. Like, I know Avery Huff is a name that has been kind of thrown around. Like, he's not someone that maybe I necessarily expect to come back. I don't want to speculate too much on names, but like, I think one situation I'm probably monitoring too is Keontre Smith. I think that, we're seeing the size of this freshman linebacker class that they're bringing in already, 4 guys deep. They're looking to bring in a 5th. Stanquan Clark, obviously, still a remaining target. And I don't think that you're a staff that's bringing in or aiming to bring in 5 linebackers if you're not expecting to see some movement there. And so Keontre Smith is definitely one situation that I guess I kind of have my eye on the defensive side of the ball.
And certainly, you guys keep touching on this 5-7 reminder. There's no doubt. Every position group can play better, can improve by talent, coach, whatever it might be. I don't think that there's anything set in stone where this is good enough. I think everybody's essentially on the table for either improving, whether it's coaching or with the players. I think Daryl Jackson, to me, is a guy that's really intriguing because I know that the coaches really like him. Look, they speak highly about him. It's been like that since day one from the spring. He was a guy that essentially it felt like a day one starter in terms of first team reps. It just felt like they really felt really highly about him. I think, assuming he'll come back, I know they'd like to have him. They like that size up front. That's ideal for them. And he was the guy that just transferred in. So I think it would be a surprise if he left. But just because I know the staff really likes him, so I think he's one to monitor. We've heard the rumors, so we'll just kind of see and see how that goes. But he's a guy that certainly Miami would like to keep on board. So breaking news, big news: Miami defensive tackle Daryl Jackson's hitting the transfer portal. It's a big one. David, just your initial thoughts on this one. It's certainly disappointing from a Miami standpoint.
Yeah, tough loss. I was first made aware of this rumor, I guess, that it might happen before the Pitt game. So what I was told was, homesickness was the reason that Daryl might want to explore options elsewhere. Um, it's tough. I think he's an NFL caliber player. I think he has that body type that Mario Cristobal wants on the line of scrimmage. And, now Miami's got to go get a defensive tackle in the portal.
This is pretty big news. Obviously, Daryl Jackson. I mean, I remember hearing about the freaky measurables when he kind of came in. Can't remember them off the top of my head, but it seems like someone that they believed is going to pop off at the NFL Combine. They're obviously very excited about adding him, and this is we were mentioning earlier about kind of moving it along and all that stuff, but I do think that this is obviously a foundational piece of what they hope to be the future of their defense, especially in 2023. Daryl Jackson, played a ton of snaps for them, and this is obviously disappointing. I don't think it was completely unexpected, in terms of David, like you said, mentioning that, obviously caught whiff of this a little while ago, but I think we hoped it was a situation that could be smoothed over. Daryl Jackson here will hit the portal, and we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, I think it's a big loss for Miami in terms of not just for their defense, but again, with what they're trying to build with their culture. And you brought him in a year ago, starts all 12 games. It's a guy that started games for you. Only one of 3 defensive players to do that this season. And again, he just kind of represents the identity of what the staff wanted. I remember going into that Pitt game, I asked defensive coordinator Kevin Steele about him and his future. And like David mentioned, they definitely viewed him as an NFL guy, a guy that actually Steele did mention about continuous career at Miami, did throw that in there, but obviously not going to happen moving forward. Just real quick, just the importance of getting a defensive tackle now that Daryl Jackson's hitting the transfer portal. How big is that position that Miami tries to get that thing filled?
Yeah, I think it becomes a big priority now. And I think you got to find a guy that can, like, one thing I liked about Daryl is he fit well playing next to Leonard Taylor. They're 2 different types of D tackles, and I think they were good partners on the interior there.
Yeah, this is what the transfer portal's for. Obviously you lose a player, you got to fill that spot. Teams all around the country are losing good players today. Miami obviously put victim to it now, so just gotta try to find a body now. Interested to see what the pivot is and where Miami goes from here.
What positions? We'll get into specifics, and maybe you guys want to drop some names here, but maybe positions of need. I just touched on 5 and 7. Every group needs to be a little bit better, but what are maybe some essential needs or what they actually need in terms of improving a position group? Was there 1 or 2 in particular that you're really looking forward to seeing how they do here?
Yeah, I know for me, let's assume Tyler is going to be the quarterback next year, Tyler Van Dyke. I think you got to get him help at receiver in terms of some dynamic threats. And I think you look at the transfer portal entries to this point, there's a lot of receivers that have entered that have either produced at different levels, different schools, and there are guys who are highly touted recruits that maybe hasn't had opportunities at those programs that are looking for them elsewhere. I know one that intrigues me more and more and more. And quite frankly, I think there's quite a bit of Oregon guys, Mario guys at Oregon that are entering the portal that are interesting, but specifically at wide receiver, Dante Thornton, who's a class of 2021 wide receiver, 6'5", 200-pound guy, nice movement skills for that size. He was a top 60 player out of Baltimore, in the 2021 class. This year, so he's primarily been a backup receiver, but this year he did have 148 yards against Utah in that game this season. So I think he's a guy with tremendous upside. I wouldn't put if I'm Mario Cristobal, I'm going and adding at least 2 wide receivers through the portal. I might even embrace doing 3. So I wouldn't put all my eggs in that Dante Thornton basket necessarily, but I think he's a guy with high upside that could be a big time get. And again, there's that Oregon connection between Mario Cristobal and himself. He signed with Mario out in Oregon. So I know for me, wide receiver is a fun position in general, especially in the portal. And Miami, that's a huge position of need. So that's one of the positions I'm looking at. What about you, Gabby?
Yeah, I mean, wide receiver to me is probably the one spot where I feel like that's that I feel like that's one spot that could potentially impact games. And I do think that there's multiple ways that you can kind of go here. I do think that Miami could use help pretty much on all three levels of the defense, on the offense as well. I'd like to see what they can do on the offensive line, and how much help and how much depth that they can kind of bring there, and just they can kind of solidify up front. But I also think that I think that they should add another veteran linebacker to kind of play alongside Wesley Bissain. I know that is a point of emphasis for the program right now, is fixing the linebacker room, how it looks, all those different types of things. And I'm not sure, again, and this is just maybe me just kind of talking, but I think they want, more ideal looking linebackers. Like, I don't think Corey Flagg is going to walk into a starting job again next year if he's still around. I think that they want to get bigger, faster, stronger at that position. And I'm wondering if they're going to, again, even on top of a big linebacker class, if they're going to go out and try to find some guys that can bring some size, athleticism, and length to the defensive side of the ball. I think that that's one spot where Miami was too small between Wayne Steed, between Corey Flagg. I think even Caleb Johnson was probably a little bit sawed off and like on the smaller side. So I do think with Wesley Bissain and pairing him with maybe another talented linebacker or something of that sort would be probably pretty intriguing for Miami.
And I remember last summer just kind of thinking, or last offseason, as Cristobal and his staff put this thing together, I was just really surprised that they didn't look at linebacker as the position of, extreme need, and I felt like they did that with the defensive line, where you bring in those guys, multiple guys up front on the D line. And Gabby, I'm with you. I think that they've got to put that kind of emphasis at linebacker, whether it's just one guy or multiple guys. I think they definitely have to improve in that area. And it was surprising to me that they believed in what they had, because I don't think it worked out this year. I don't think that group was certainly good enough, and the defense certainly struggled this year. The numbers are not good, ranking around 10th in total defense and scoring defense.
Going back to that Oregon theme, Justin Flo, who is a 5-star linebacker. I think, what was the story going back to recruiting? He was a Miami fan, Miami was definitely in the mix there for a little bit. And he's a guy that looks the part, 6'2", 6'3", 230. He was a 5-star recruit. I don't know if he is, if he has played to that level at this point. But I do think, and there are some areas of his game that need work, but what he does bring is physicality, and I think he can be that middle linebacker that can stuff the run downhill in the box. So again, Oregon theme, you mentioned too, Gabby, the offensive line. You're interested in what they're doing there. Bram Walden, a guy from the 2021 class at Oregon, just entered the portal, and you reported recently that Miami offered him, right? Just now in the portal.
Yeah, that's a former top 100 talent. He was the top ranked player in the state of Arizona in that class of 2021, 6'4", over 300 pounds now. Hasn't really gone a ton of burn, didn't play at all as a true freshman in 2021, played 8 snaps in 2022. But David, I know that's a deep Oregon offensive line. There's a lot of veterans on that line. And, when you can keep those guys healthy, you want to roll with them and you want to keep that continuity. So just didn't feel like someone that was really able to crack the rotation a ton. But I was kind of, just kind of throwing some feelers out there. Cooper Patagna, who's one of our 24/7 sports analysts, worked in that Mario Cristobal recruiting department. He says he's a big fan of Bram Walden. And so, I think that, people that obviously were involved in the recruiting process of him and watched him as a recruit think that that there's still a lot to be kind of tapped into there. And of course, Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal were the guys that identified him, got him from Arizona to Eugene. So I think that there's a chance that, it sounds like, they're definitely going to try to get him down to Coral Gables. I know Blair Angulo, who's our Mountain West analyst, said that Arizona State, UCLA are a couple schools involved, and BYU and Miami are a couple others he's considering too. So it'll be interesting to see if Miami can get him down to the East Coast for a visit.
Yeah,
Chris, can I bring up one other name at a position? Just corner, Devontae Brown, right? UCF, Miami legacy. His brother Damari Brown is a Miami recruit in this 2023 cycle. I think you project next year's roster corner. I think there's holes there. I think they have to address it in the portal. So Devontae Brown, 6'2" corner, started a lot of games at UCF. he's another name I would throw out there.
Yeah, and cornerback is one of the positions on my list that I have a position of need. You look like you're going to lose Stevenson, kind of moving on. DJ Ivy's graduated. This is a cornerback room that didn't show a lot of growth in terms of their young guys last year. They got spot opportunities that didn't go well in those limited opportunities. You can't say that you've got automatic starters moving forward. And with all those big plays that they gave up in the passing game, they've got to be better on the back end. You feel good about Cam Kitchens, but at cornerback, David, like you mentioned, the size with Brown, you obviously like the recruiting ties with his brother there. That's obviously something you're hoping to get. I think one of the things, my overall takeaway with all this too is just this staff has to really understand, and I think that hopefully they do. They know what they have now. They had a year under their belt. They, regardless of how they evaluated this team in the spring or what I thought of these linebackers, whatever the case may be, they have to know exactly what they need, what they have in their room, whether it's cornerback, these other positions you guys are mentioning. And I think that will be the big thing. They've got to know what they feel comfortable with, what they have, and kind of going back to receiver a little bit too, because I do think cornerback is a big one, even though they have some experienced guys coming back. I'm very curious to see what happens with these wide receivers. If they want to go, like Keyshawn's decided to leave, these other guys didn't get a lot of playing time and kind of rotated in. We do know that Colby Young stepped up, but I'm curious about these other guys and if the staff really it sees them having a bright future at Miami or if they're going to move on. But I'm with you that height is very intriguing with Thornton there. I like guys with height. They got that in Young, a little bit with Ladson. I'd like to see more of that, and obviously speed. Another guy that I'm really interested in, and Gabby, with your article, your VIP article on Inside the U recently, talked a lot about maybe some slot guys, intriguing guys. I'm curious what the staff, what they're going to do, with Strepo. Is he their guy in the slot? He's a leader, all of those things. But if you're going to bring in a highly qualified guy in the slot, what do you do there? So I think the staff just really has to identify who they can really win games with and who they need to improve on.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I think David brought up a good point. I do think they should prioritize maybe some of those outside guys. I think you can kind of, you mentioned Xavier Strepo, obviously, I think a high character kid, one of the leaders of the program. Tyler Van Dyke's coming back. I think you can feel optimistic about what the slot looks like, right? I mean, I always would be an advocate for bringing in someone else, kind of just continuing to elevate the competition in the room. There's definitely a couple slot guys I'm kind of a fan of. I definitely love Nate McCullum, who's a Georgia Tech transfer, kind of been pounding the table for Jimmy Horn Jr., who's a USF transfer. But in reality, I don't think the slot is necessarily a huge issue in comparison to maybe some of the outside guys. That's definitely something I can agree with. I mean, you again, Xavier Strepo, I think Rashard Smith showed flashes over the course of the 2022 season that he's kind of potentially taking that next step. And then you got two promising young freshmen that are coming in Nathaniel Joseph and Robbie Washington, two guys that can definitely play in the slot. Maybe Nathaniel Joseph, maybe more of a primary slot, while Robbie Washington, maybe someone that has a little bit more versatility where he can kind of move around a little bit, but can definitely, get it done at the slot too. And I think both those guys are twitchy and bring a little bit more of that juice to the position too. And I wouldn't be surprised if both of those guys or either one of them was factoring in as a true freshman next fall. So the slot is definitely one of the more interesting positions, but I can see it. I could see them maybe not addressing that particularly, in the transfer portal.
You guys, there's a position that I'm very curious. We have not discussed this. I'm curious what you guys think of this, but I'm curious what they're going to do at running back. Look, they're bringing back guys. I know they got Citizen. They like him, but I don't think the running back, the running game was as productive as they would have liked. I obviously, it improved a little bit from the year before, but Mario Cristobal wants to run the ball, regardless who the coordinator is, regardless who the coaching staff. He wants to run the ball, establish that physical identity. Do you guys think with what they have on board right now, it's good enough to be a productive top 5 rushing attack, or do they got to improve? Where do you guys see this in the run game?
They need bigger bodies. They need guys 210 plus, I think, which you mentioned Trevante Citizen. He's one of those guys. To me, Jalen Knighton and Henry Parrish are complementary backs. I think that's what they're best at, kind of change of pace guys. So I would like to see them at 210-pound back. I think that's the style of back Mario Cristobal prefers in general. And again, going back to the Oregon theme, Byron Cardwell, who is a class of 2021 guy out of San Diego, ran for 417 yards as a true freshman when Mario Cristobal was still at Oregon. He's in the portal. One guy I like, and I don't know how realistic this is for Miami, Carson Steele out of Ball State. He is a 6 foot, 215-pound sledgehammer of a back. He's fun to watch. Ran for 1,500 yards this year at Ball State. So I'm with you 100%. They need a back, but to me, they just can't go out and get any back. I think they need that kind of bigger bodied back.
And that goes to what I was saying earlier. This staff just needs to identify what they actually want, and have these like exact desired traits and go after that rather than, trying to fill holes. I think that they just have to have a clear identity. I feel like on both sides of the ball, they really struggled with their identity.
And let me say this to that point, I do think, and again, I think a lot of college staffs, their heads are spinning today just because it's a lot to take in. So many names entering the portal and more's coming. But Mario Cristobal, in January, added Andrew Rogers, who is Michigan State's transfer portal guy for that first year of the Mel Tucker era. And, I don't know how involved he is, like boots on the ground level, but they have Alonzo Highsmith in the building who has a major scouting background at the NFL level. So, the infrastructure is there in terms of being able to scout guys and know, okay, this guy can help us, this guy can't. I'm curious how Miami attacks it relative to the other teams in the ACC and at the Power 5 level.
And just final thoughts as we wrap this up. We touched on a bunch of different positions, but Gaby, just kind of final thoughts. Anything that we haven't addressed that you'd like to discuss here in the final moments?
Yeah, no, I think really, I think there's just kind of maybe going to need to be some patience involved in this process. Again, I don't think this is going to be a wild kind of head spinning, period. These next 45 days between, the race to early signing period from the high school level on December 21st, and the transfer portal going on at the same time. Just kind of to bring some context to the situation, Miami will have official visit weekends, probably these next 2 visits, and then into January a little bit, but they are kind of tight on visits. While a bunch of people had official visits this past weekend, Miami didn't. I think that they might start hosting official visits this coming weekend, and then of course again before the early signing period. So I think if transfers kind of start emerging soon, we're going to try to see Miami get them on campus or try to get them on campus, but also be aware that they are kind of tight on numbers. There's 21 official visits to use between now and basically the traditional signing day. So it's going to be interesting to see how they allocate all those spots, and, stay tuned. I think there's going to be new names rolling in every day. I think you're going to constantly see some eye poppers and head scratchers and be like, man, why would that guy even test the market? But I think it's going to be exciting, man. And I do think a lot of Miami's eventual transfer portal targets might not even be in the transfer portal right now. So, definitely stay locked in, and because it's definitely a process, and one that I think that they're completely embracing in Coral Gables and ready to attack.
I'll add to that, it's a crazy time in terms of I think the actual coach, it's the transfer portal thing is so different than the high school recruiting. The coaching staff is on the road right now visiting high school recruits like they always do for December. So, how locked in are they even to what's going on in the portal today? I'm sure they're checking in, of course, but they're on the road visiting high school players. So really it's the player personnel guys back in Coral Gables kind of running point on this portal stuff. It's a brave new world in terms of talent acquisition at the college level. And I don't know if anyone really knows where any of this is going, but to echo Gaby's point, I do think Miami is positioned well to add quality players in the portal that will help immediately.
Yeah, and I think just, you kind of mentioned, just the amount of quality talent, quality expectations that'll be out there. I expect a lot of teams to want to get involved here. I think that's what you'll see. I think Miami's going to want some guys, but other schools are going to want them too. It's going to be a very competitive thing out there. That's why I think really identifying what you want and really targeting certain guys will be key. And again, we'll definitely stay tuned and stay locked in just for guys that they're looking forward to. Also, maybe other guys that decide to enter the portal window from Miami's standpoint. So appreciate you guys for doing this. Definitely stay locked in to InsideTheU.com for plenty more information and updates. I'll see you guys. it up.